And welcome back to the Financially Simple Experience. Today, friends, I'm honored to do something I've never done before. I've talked a lot about selling a business. I've talked a lot about, from a buyer's perspective, what buyers would look for in a business as they were making an offer and walking through the due diligence process. And as you well know, last episode, I also mentioned a very emotional episode for me. In fact, I said it's probably one of the most emotional episodes I've ever done, barring the event that happened with my father. But now that I have sold my 3 companies, and the reasons for it. Well, today I'm honored because I want you to hear from a buyer's perspective. I often talk about the seller, you and I as business owners, but we often don't talk about what a buyer looks for. So joining me today is the president of WealthSource, Mr. Patrick Brewer. How are you, brother?
I'm doing well, Justin. Thank you for having me on the show.
So Patrick, you and I have gone through a journey over the last 6-9 months together, talking about, hey, is this a dance we want to have? Do we do the dance? We've got through the process of due diligence, and now, hey, I have now been purchased by WealthSource, and now I'm on the executive team with WealthSource, now driving the purpose forward. So before we get into the buyer component, Patrick, I would love for you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what specifically you do for WealthSource.
Yeah, so I'm the president and CMO of WealthSource. I started my career on the asset management side of the financial services industry. So for those that are listening, you may be familiar with Vanguard, Dimensional Fund Advisors, really big mutual fund companies. I was basically educating financial advisors and teaching them how to build portfolios and trade and do all the stuff that they would need to do for their clients. And then I got the itch. I got the entrepreneurial itch to Justin. I'm sure you and everyone listening is all too familiar with, where you decide to hang it up with corporate and hang your own shingle and get busy. So that's kind of what I did. And I built my own practice similar to yours in the wealth management space. Built another company that was on the consulting side of the industry in financial services as well. And I was also acquired about 18 months ago by WealthSource. And part of that acquisition was bringing my entire team over and continuing to build this company into something that has a national footprint and is an amazing place to work with a great organizational culture. And, my role in that is overseeing the executive team, making sure that everybody's properly resourced. We have what we need to grow. And then also, since, in business, we all kind of wear multiple hats sometimes, I'm also leading our marketing efforts and making sure that we're thinking through organic marketing and our M&A channel in the right way so that we can actually execute.
So with your roles, can you clearly define who is WealthSource? Who is WealthSource partners? What's the footprint, and what's the motivation that WealthSource has at this particular season of its career or its life?
I mean, WealthSource is a national registered investment advisory firm. We provide wealth management services primarily to business owners and others that have complexity in their financial life and are looking to connect that complexity to outcomes in the future that they can be proud of, right? So it could be as simple as making sure that they spend more time with their family, they accomplish, different aspects of their life that they're passionate about, and making sure that their money actually works for them instead of just accumulating this big pile that, eventually gets distributed out to other people. And it's like, hey, maybe you should have spent that or thought through that differently. So all of us are super passionate about helping people make really good decisions when it comes to their money and maximizing the utility of it. As far as who WealthSource Partners is, I mean, it's a collection of experts, right? Just like any professional services business, we've got people that are experts in tax, people that are experts in investments and financial planning and operations and compliance. And we need to figure out a way to make those experts communicate effectively to actually build something of value. So that's what lights me up is the uniqueness of everybody on the team and just kind of our mission to provide better wealth management services and better financial advice to business owners and others in that community.
So as you know, Heritage Investors was a state registered RIA that we were fastly approaching the SEC mandated limits where we're going to have to register with the SEC, which is one of the catalysts for my looking out and about of, do I want to take this on myself or do I want to partner with a firm very similar or like WealthSource? But not only do we have Heritage Investors, we also had Heritage Business Advisors and a business advisory platform to where we instructed business owners how to improve and increase their number one asset, which is their business, through valuation growth or through exit planning strategies. And we also had the Financially Simple experience, a marketing channel to teach and educate business owners. So in my world, we had three different companies. And what I found as a seller and my attraction to WealthSource was everything that you just mentioned, but also the fact that there is WealthSource Business Advisory, an advisory platform which the Heritage family of business advisors could integrate toward. And we also had the Financially Simple experience, which would continue, maybe not underneath the same name going forward, but it would continue nonetheless to educate business owners with the idea of, hey, you can accomplish this dream. So from a from a seller's perspective, I saw WealthSource as a hand in glove for this next chapter of my life. But I'm interested, and I think the whole catalyst I want to spend the majority of our time on, Patrick, is what caused WealthSource to be attracted to the three companies that our team had built?
I think it was, a lot of the intangibles, right? Like you built pretty phenomenal processes. You have a team that would literally die on the battlefield for you. You've got, and the business model connects in all aspects of what you were trying to do. You've got information products in Financially Simple that provide broad-based educational resources for business owners that they can consume on demand, and they can get to know you through this podcast, through videos, through, blog content. People don't want to be sold. They want to be educated. They want to feel like they're part of the process, and they want that on their terms. And I think Financially Simple to me felt very congruent with that expectation from business owners and consumers. And then, the business consulting side, your biggest asset, like you talk about as a business owner, is your business. How do you improve that to actually turn that into something that can be liquid at some point, and provide for you and your family beyond the cash flow that you're taking out of it right now? I think you built some pretty interesting and compelling tools to help with that process and value growth, and just some of the other consulting resources and ways that you align the management team and the other stakeholders in the organization. And then on the Heritage Investor side, the personal financial planning and wealth management, a lot of people push that to the side. They want to focus on all the other fun stuff, but they don't want to address the elephant in the room, which is, how do I actually use this money to get the things that I want in my life? And, all too often we wake up and we're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, and we haven't really thought that through. And then the next thing we know, we wake up on a cloud and we just leave all this complexity to the people that we loved in our life. So I think all of those things work together to put us, the buyer, in a position where, since we're building very similar things, we were like, wow, we could pick up a really great team with good processes and, frankly, a methodology that works for the business owner. Why wouldn't we do that? It's kind of my thought around it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And friends, I've not asked Patrick these questions before, and I know he can testify to that. I've never really asked, hey, why was WealthSource interested in Heritage? We were doing the dance. I was the seller saying, I'm interested in perhaps joining WealthSource, but even though I tried to assume, and we all know what assumption means, I tried to assume what the catalyst was. It's interesting for me to hear this for the first time. So Patrick, I want to go through a rapid fire, first thought on your mind. So as you know, and you come to learn, I look at business through 8 key areas. Okay. And we taught about these 8 key areas several ways, through our books, through the podcast, through videos. And so friends, if you're just now joining us, I challenge you to go back and start about episode number 40 or so. And it's going to deep dive into each of these eight key areas. But for those of you who maybe don't know them, we look at business in these areas. Number 1 being planning, leadership. Number 2, sales, marketing, people, operations, finance, and legal. So I know that your framework, Patrick, maybe doesn't align exactly with the way I communicate, but I think you know where we're headed with this series of questions. If I were to ask you in rapid fire, first thing that comes to your mind, and we're going to talk about planning, business planning, what is it that you have seen thus far in the Heritage business world from a buyer's perspective that you thought was exceptional with that component of planning?
I would say the fact that you had very defined roles and responsibilities, and those people were empowered to make decisions across different functional areas of the business. So you had a COO who was focused on operating the business. You had a advisory team that all they did was meet with clients and handle questions that were related to markets or financial planning or business consulting. You had a marketing team that had specific KPIs that were relevant for, the things that marketers care about, which is attention and driving traffic and capturing information so that we can work them through the funnel. I think, just even being intentional about having an offsite, right? Most firms don't take a second to meet with their team and see how they're doing and communicate where the organization's going and getting buy-in. So the fact that you would do at least an annual offsite where you bring everybody together, you would take feedback, you had a structured process for doing that, was impressive, because I know it's easy to ignore. And then just generally, everyone in the organization, when I sat down with them and talked to them about what they were doing and what their role was and kind of where the company was headed, they could give me a clear answer, which, if you read any of the studies that have been done by these big consulting companies, McKinsey, Deloitte, it's like, what percentage of people even know what the mission of the company is? Like, it's very few. So I think you had done a good job of making sure that everybody on the team was bought in. They knew what they were selling. They knew what their role was in helping the company, and they could articulate that.
Wow, that's humbling. Thank you. I wasn't expecting that answer. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. One of the things that I have to assume from a buyer's perspective is you knew the process that you wanted to craft through the due diligence process. You knew the process, and from a seller's perspective, the process that many times can feel disjointed, but it's intentional in the nature from a buyer's crafting the process. I understand that. I've instructed even clients that the buyer runs the show. So whenever we talk about the process that the buyer went through, what are the high points in the process that you saw that you said, hey, I think all those things about Justin at this point, but I want to vet him out. I want to see truly if his team, as you said earlier, would die for him on the battlefield. I want to know if those processes that he's created is just fluff or not. I want to see if the revenues are as dynamic as is being illustrated or told to me. I want to find the skeletons in the closet. Can you kind of walk from a buyer's perspective what you saw as being the high points in that due diligence process?
Yeah, I think there's multiple. Due diligence is a little bit of a lost art, right? I feel like, maybe 10, 15 years ago, firms did a lot more due diligence. I think we've done a good job of putting a due diligence process in place. We start with financial due diligence, so collecting everything from tax returns to run rate revenues on every single client. I'm not going to go through the entire list, but it's long.
Right. It is, friends. It's very long.
It takes a little while to compile it. And then we actually work with a third party. Their name's Alaris Acquisitions, and they help us with the financial recasts and the due diligence as well. So we don't just rely on our own team. We actually run that through a third party to make sure that we're getting good data, that it's checked more than once. And we feel comfortable that revenue is going to show up after the integration takes place. So the financial piece is obviously important. And then on the, let's call it the strategic due diligence side of the process, we flew out, we spent a couple of days in Knoxville. We met with each team member individually. Like I said, we asked them what their role was, what they were excited about, where the company was going, what role they would play in that. Everyone gave very clear answers and was excited about the potential for integration. And then we look through each of the different processes that were associated with the three businesses to figure out, okay, is this actually, do these things connect, or are we just going to be maintaining three disparate businesses that are going to suck up all of our time and our energy to the point where we're not going to be able to scale? So that was primarily what I was looking for, and I instructed our team to look for was, do we have real intellectual property here that can be leveraged in a way that allows this business to help this business and vice versa. So that process was varied, but from the marketing team's perspective, we took an inventory of all of the different assets that were created for each of the three businesses. And then we put it through our ideal client profile process, looked at the client journey map to figure out, can we get from a point of awareness to research to evaluation to decision with the clients that we're looking to target. And then do we have an effective onboarding process to make sure that we're educating people along the way? So I could go through that for each of the divisions, but I think it was a multifaceted process, and it should be to make sure that you're actually buying something that has real value. Because at the end of the day, if you buy a company and those revenues don't show up, or that you can't get any lift, organic growth out of the transaction after the integration, I mean, you're kind of just spending a lot of time and energy, and frankly, assuming a lot of risk without any return. So we need to make sure that from our perspective, the revenues come over, but we can also get lift and improve efficiencies to create an ROI for all stakeholders.
So friends, what I just heard was a lot of different key points that we have touched on for teaching from a seller's position. As you and I as business owners, and as Patrick as a business owner, are looking at our own businesses now, and we're thinking about, hey, how are we crafting our current business for the next buyer? Remember, I always say the number one customer is the person who's going to acquire us or lend us or become minority partners or majority partners with us. That's our number one customer. And so what I think I just heard, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I just heard that the team at Heritage crafted the business in such a way to where it was attractive to the buyer, as we need to have this business to accelerate our business going forward.
Yeah. I mean, it was a car that we didn't need to rebuild, right? So it's like, if you've got a fleet of cars and you're like, okay, I want to take this one out and drive it. This one just drove. Like, we didn't need to be like, okay, we need to replace the engine. The tires are a little worn out. It's just like, all right, we bought this thing. We can take it on the road and drive it as fast as we need to. And as an organization, I mean, if that's kind of what we're looking for is companies that are well run, that have the processes and the team and the strategy in place to be able to scale. And then obviously the biggest thing, I'm sure you talk a lot about this on your podcast, is cultural fit, right? There needs to be that organizational alignment in culture. And if it's not there, it's almost impossible to get to that point. So I think that's one area that we could be stronger in identifying. I don't know if there's a great way of doing that. Maybe you can educate me on this, but I feel like for us, it's always been more of a gut feel and just spending enough time with the firm and their leaders to figure out if it's a good fit. But I feel like we arrived at that point too, because we spent tons of time together.
Right. Absolutely. You and I spent a lot of time together, and intentionally
spent
a lot of time together, because we knew what each of us desired going forward and how we were going to integrate together to now build WealthSource, where my focus was going to shift from building these three companies now to helping build the overarching company we call WealthSource now. So, hey, Patrick, whenever we look at going forward, we realize that now in business together, I represent now WealthSource along with you. And we realize that companies can grow primarily through two methods. Number one, we can grow through marketing organically, either external or internal marketing, or we can grow through acquisitions. And most companies who are going to make dynamic footprints are going to do both.
Yep.
But as we go forward with WealthSource, and we're talking to business owners here, and they need to focus on these 8 areas, focus on for example, planning. What specifically in planning do they need to do to attract a buyer? What specifically in leadership do they need to do to attract a buyer? And I realize I've recorded probably hundreds of podcasts around each of these 8 areas. And I know that you haven't listened or haven't studied hundreds of podcasts or books around these 8 areas, but from your perspective, if we're looking, let's say, at the people component, the employee base, Yep. What is it that companies really need to focus in on is relationship as relating to their employees to attract the ideal buyer?
Yeah, I would say broad strokes, and you're obviously the expert here as far as it relates to this, but the way I look at it is if the company is at a place where it can afford strategic leadership, there needs to be leaders in place that manage the company's functional areas. So if the company has a compliance and legal requirement that it needs to fulfill, we don't have a random person who has no experience kind of checking the box on that. We've got somebody with an appropriate amount of experience who is empowered to do that role and make decisions in that area of the business. And that person has a process, right? They actually have a proven process that they can follow and their team can follow to do those things, even if they're not there. So what I'm looking for is if my leadership team took a month off And would the company continue to function, or would it completely blow up, right? So the more that you can create those systems and points of collaboration between your team and processes through technology to make yourself irrelevant to the business, if you're in leadership, that's what a buyer's looking for, because the buyer wants to buy cash. They want to buy a system that manufactures $100 bills, while their leadership team, frankly, is not there, honestly. And that said, when the leaders are there, because you want them there, you want a strong leadership team that you're acquiring who is incentivized to grow, they are strategically advancing the business. They're planting the seeds that allow for everyone else to move the business forward. So I like to say that for the other side of the business, you've got your directors and kind of your middle managers, and then everyone else across the business that's doing task level work and project oriented work. They need to have clear SOPs that they can follow, and that business needs to work. It can't be reliant on any particular person in that division. So if you have a manager who is critical to that division, if they left, they would take all of the IP with them. You've got an issue, right? Like we're not going to be able to scale with that type of structure in place. So I would say that for the leadership team, they're strategically advancing the business, and they're not required to be there in order for the business to function. And then everyone else beneath them has clear instructions, roles and responsibilities, and is empowered to continue to do what the business needs to do to operate day to day.
Friends, that sounds like decentralization to me. The word that I often say is we've got to decentralize ourselves and our key leaders from the epicenter of the business so the business can operate without us being there. We want to build the proverbial golden goose, right? That's what I just heard Patrick clearly and articulately.
In many more words, I articulated it.
Well, but it's nonetheless, it's the same thing. We're trying to build the golden goose. We're trying to build the business where it can operate without the key executives or key leaders or key stakeholders involved.
Yeah.
So Patrick, we've gone through a transition now. I have officially sold these 3 business entity assets to WealthSource. WealthSource is now the flag under which I march. But yet we have this podcast. We have this exoskeleton of listeners, right? Who have been really tuned in to the Financially Simple experience. And, you've seen several of the emails that come in. We've seen we actually have spoken with a few clients who have experienced the Financially Simple journey. They listened to us on the podcast, they became clients, and now in and of themselves, they're reaping benefit from the knowledge and the advice they've been given. But I've had a few people since our last episode release talking about, hey, I've sold this, that are asking this question. Hey, Justin, okay, we get the fact that Heritage and Heritage Business Advisors are now WealthSource and WealthSource Business Advisors. We get that. But what about Financially Simple? Yeah. What's the future of Financially Simple look for going forward? And friends, I got to tell you, last week, my emotionalism that I had, the heartfelt that I have is directly around this question. And I'll say it in this way, because for the last 4 years, I have poured everything, every bit of my life into this microphone. I have poured knowledge. If I didn't know something, I'd research it intimately in detail and be able to communicate about that particular point. If I couldn't do that, I'd bring an expert in to talk through those points, while at the same time sharing my heart, my life stories. I mean, you friends, you were with me on the microphone the day after I found out my dad passed away unexpectedly. You were there. You remember some of those conversations that I was internalizing as a business owner, trying to show you authenticity. And even as we record this podcast, last episode, and even this episode, authenticity is who I am. That's where I live. So Patrick, you and I have had lots of conversations about this, so you're not going to surprise me with anything you say, but you are the president of WealthSource. You and the CEO and the executive team have a very crystal clear vision on what we, myself included, want to try to achieve going forward. So where do you see the Financially Simple experience in the future? Where do you see at this point? And again, this is not the gospel, but if we're trying to set some expectations out for our listeners, what is it going to look like going forward from a perspective of WealthSource?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it with the word authenticity. So I think I'll add another one, which is intimacy. I feel like, you can only communicate so much from behind the microphone, from a video, through a blog post. I'd really love to see this start kind of showing up more on the live events, like bringing people together in community to share their stories with other business owners and to get feedback directly. So I think my vision, whether it's called financially simple or whatever we want to call it, it's more of an idea around bringing business owners together in community and helping them solve hard problems. And some of those problems are in the mirror, and other problems are related to what's going on in the business. And we can kind of work through them logically and functionally in order to get to the result that we're looking for. But at the end of the day, I think what you've built is, you should be proud of it. And I think anyone tuning into this, there's a ton of information here for you to build whatever type of business you're looking to build, in whatever time frame you're looking to build it. But from my seat and from the others at WealthSource, I mean, our goal would be to drive more intimacy, to bring people together. I think is ultimately what we'd be looking to do, and to retain all of the content and the value that has been created to this point in whatever form that ends up becoming manifest.
That's awesome. So friends, I'm excited for this next chapter in my life. I'm excited that you've been on this journey with me. It's amazing. I don't think I ever told you this, Patrick. I was speaking at an event in Minnesota, an FPA event, in a side position in one of these breakout sessions. And I got on this airplane after this event. I'm sitting in the very last row and flying back from St. Paul, Minnesota, back to Knoxville. And this, I'm going to call him young kid, probably I'm going to say mid-20s or so. I'm showing my age now, sits down beside me. Right. And he says, "You're Justin Goodbread." And in that moment, I'm going, "And who are you? And how do you know my name? And why are you talking to me on the airplane? I'm exhausted. Let me go to sleep." Right. My introvertness kicks in. And we got to talking. And what he said was exactly that. He goes, "Man, I've listened to your podcast. I've read your book. I've read your blog. I've seen you on video, but man, it's one thing to read and have your voice and talk through this, but watching you on stage and watching you conduct the audience and bringing us to that position, it was his word, magical." Right. So I think, Patrick, what I'm excited about is being authentic, being who I am, and being able to use my, as Dan Sullivan say, highest and best use so that we can impact as many business owners. At the end of the day, I don't think the mission has changed. To me, the way I view it, I view what I did with Heritage as trying to give you, the business owner, as much information as you need to build whatever your dream is, to accomplish that goal, to accomplish what it is that you set out, why you literally bleed and for your business, why you lose sleep at night, why you take on this stress that you take on. There is a reason behind that. Oftentimes we lose that hope, that zeal, that spunk when we're business owners. So to me, my passion has always been, let me give you the tools to let you build, as Patrick just clearly said, the business which you desire, and at whatever speed and time frame you desire. What I'm excited about going forward is no matter what the name is, whether it's financially simple or whatever it may be, that authenticity, and I love the word intimacy, will continue to permeate and try to impact. We are the backbone. We are the backbone. We are what drives the economic engine. And if we are not at peak performance, then not only does the economy suffer, but candidly, our families suffer. And we've sacrificed our lives on this altar of business for naught. And I don't want that for myself. I didn't want that for myself. Patrick, I know you didn't want it for yourself. And we built businesses that were attractive to a buyer. We sold, and now we want to continue to share our experience so that we can empower as many people as possible. So
yeah,
with that being said,
the other thing I'll add too, Justin, and you and I haven't even really talked about this, but it could make sense for other members of the team to create content on different areas of the business that can help, owners get results on marketing and,
absolutely,
different aspects of the business too. So hopefully I'm able to participate, and others in the team are able to participate in that mission as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exciting to me because there's friends, I can tell you, I was on the executive committee conversation yesterday, the executive team meeting, and there are some sharp cookies on this WealthSource team. I mean, I'm humbled just to be able to just listen to them as they talk is pretty crazy for me to do that. So Patrick, as we wrap this up, you know, we've got a listener base here of business owners. What's one key point of advice or one hope or one challenge that you would leave the audience with as we sign off on today's episode?
Ooh, that is a really good question, and not one that I prepared for. I would say a lot of that's going to be dependent on the stage of the business that you're in. However, I think one that would apply universally is, generally from my experience, your business is just a mirror to who you are as an individual. So the more you can work on yourself and how you're showing up in the business. If you're showing up in the business with anxious energy, guess what? Your people are going to be anxious. If you're showing up in the business with relaxed intensity, ready to attack it like an investor, viewing yourself as a consultant and not emotionally attached to every single little decision, well, guess what? It's going to scale. You're going to give really good advice and people are going to be at ease in their roles inside of the company. So I think, to me, that's always been the key to success, is showing up in a way that puts people in a position where they view you as somebody who can lead the company forward, but they feel empowered and comfortable with where the company's at, where it's going, and they feel excited about the mission. So I think that would be my point of advice, regardless of the business stage. Is business is, it's essentially a reflection of who you are as an individual. And the more you can do the work to show up in a way that the team needs you and the business frankly needs you, the more success you will have.
Wow. That's sage wisdom there, brother. Sage wisdom. So friends, my guest today, as you know, has been Mr. Patrick Brewer. He is the president of WealthSource, the company who has acquired my previous companies. And I got to tell you, friends, I'm excited for this next chapter in my life. I'm excited for you to join me and the new team as we, not just me, as Patrick just alluded to, speak into your lives, hopefully to guide you to reach your dreams. But I'm excited that you can be on this journey with us nonetheless. And so from Patrick and myself, thank you for today. Thank you for allowing us just to kind of speak. I wanted to have the opportunity for you to hear a buyer's perspective on what they saw in relation to our companies. See, I firmly believe this, friends, that you can't lead somebody to where you've never been. You can't guide somebody successfully if you've never walked the path. Can't do it. Now, you can read about it in a book, but you're just not that good about leading people. So we've been there. Patrick and I have built businesses, we've sold businesses, and now we're striving yet again to impact as many people to help them realize their dreams. So friends, from myself, from Patrick, I want to tell you, thank you for today. Thank you for joining us. I realize life is hard. I get it. We all go through hard times. Each and every one of us. Life is hard, but life is good. We are so blessed. The very fact that we have food on our table and a roof over our head is just beyond measure. We're blessed. And I realize that sometimes things are frustrating. Trust me, I realize they're frustrating. And as I go into this new journey, I'm going to be frustrated. As you journey into darker waters in your business, you're going to get frustrated, but we don't have to be frustrated. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all go out and make it a great day.